Okay, we are on another chapter of True Stories of Heavenly Visitors, Where Angels Walk by Joan Wester Anderson. He will send angels. How many angels are there? One who transforms our life is plenty. Traditional saying. There are many points of view about guardian angels. Some scholars believe that each of us may have two. But in telling the following story, Hope Price of Portland, Oregon, obviously believes that one is indeed plenty. If it is true that we each have a guardian angel, then mine has been seen 3 times that I know of, each time by a different person. My mother, Minnie Metcalf Miller, said that when I was 3 weeks old, and very tiny because I was premature, she was awakened in the night by a beautiful young girl bending over her. Mother somehow understood from this beautiful visitor that her new baby, asleep in the next room, needed her. Mother also seemed to know that she would be facing a long ordeal, so she dressed carefully and went into me. She found me blue in the face and struggling for breath. There followed a long battle with pneumonia, in which Mother did not have her clothes off for several nights. She said the beautiful girl was there beside her every minute of the fight with death. A kind neighbor also saw the girl and asked my mother, "Who is the beautiful lady staying with you since the baby has been so sick? I see her come out on the front porch sometimes." The beautiful lady disappeared when I was completely out of danger. Years later, in 1934, she returned to rescue me again. I now had small children of my own and had just gotten a divorce. I had been told by my doctor that I must have a serious operation, and an intensely religious woman named Lude was doing my housework. She was to stay with my 3 young children while I went to the hospital. However, Lude seemed dissatisfied with the conditions in our house, and she was used to working in wealthy households with other servants. One afternoon, as Lude entered the room with a vacuum cleaner, a cat, who was calling on my cat, jumped through the window, breaking the glass. This was the last straw for Lude. She gave notice rather sulkily, saying she would leave in the morning, as she simply couldn't stay on. I wondered what I would do. I couldn't leave 3 children alone in the house while I was in the hospital. I finally decided I would have to call the doctor the next morning and tell him I could not have the operation. However, early next morning, Lude entered my room fairly beaming with good humor. She was wearing a white uniform. "Breakfast is ready," she smiled. "Why, Lude, how nice of you to get breakfast before I go," I said. "Mrs. Price," Lude replied, "I've changed my mind. I'm not going. I had a vision last night. A beautiful young girl, an angel, came flying into my bedside through the window the cat broke. She was all in shining white and surrounded with light. It lit up my whole room. She asked me not to leave you because you needed me. I'm going to stay just as long as you need me." So I went to the hospital, comforted by the thought that the children were safely watched by Lude. In each case, the angel was seen by a kind person with a good deal of spiritual understanding. They were the kind of persons able to see angels, obviously. The lovely angel seems to appear when I need her most. I hope she always will. Perhaps someday I will see her myself. Yeah, that would be wonderful. A voice from beyond. The angels regard our safety, undertake our defense, direct our ways, and exercise a constant solicitude that no evil befalls us. John Calvin. Margaret walked the dog every morning. Her husband, Paul, not their real names, did so at night. There was a small park across the busy street in front of their house, and Paul usually took the dog there. He was a reserved man who enjoyed solitude and rarely showed his emotions. About 9 one April evening, Paul and the dog started out on their customary jaunt. I'm never in the garage after dinner, Margaret relates, but that night I happened to go there for something. The garage door was open, and even though it was almost dark outside, I had a perfect view of Paul going down our driveway to the sidewalk. Paul had to wait a few moments until there was a break in the traffic. While he was standing there, Margaret heard a voice calling, "Paul," it said. That was all. It was a male voice, the kindest sounding voice I'd ever heard, she says. There is shrubbery alongside our driveway, and I assumed our next-door neighbor, hidden from my view by the garage wall and the foliage, was calling Paul. But I know his voice, and this wonderful voice was not his. A second later I remembered the neighbor wasn't home. Paul did not appear to have heard the voice. Maybe it had been her imagination, or the sound of the wind. But there was no wind. Someone in a passing car? But the voice had been coming from her direction, as if the caller was near. Puzzled, Margaret wondered what, if anything, she should do. Again, as her husband started to step down from the curb, a kind voice called his name, "Paul." Now Margaret saw Paul stop. Had he heard the voice this time? Incredibly, a large tree in the park started to fall. Down it came, almost in slow motion, until, with a loud crash, it came to rest across the park path, its highest branches lying almost into the street, the spot where Paul always walked, where he would have been at that moment had a voice not delayed him. Stunned, Margaret stared at the tree. Paul, in his usual unemotional manner, crossed the street, went around the tree, looked at it for a moment, and continued on his way. But by the time he returned, he had had a chance to think. "Someone called my name," he said to Margaret. "It happened twice. Did you hear the voice?" "Yes. I wondered if you had. But there wasn't anyone around, unless you saw someone." "No, I didn't," Margaret told him. "And from the garage, I would have had a good view." They looked at each other. "Well then," Paul said in his usual calm fashion, "it had to have been my guardian angel." Margaret replayed the episode in her mind many times, and her husband told several neighbors and relatives about it, but neither of them have ever found anyone to thank. I bet they could just thank, the air and maybe the guardian. Well, most likely, they'd probably hear it. I think it might be. It's just my guess. Okay, this is my last chapter for tonight. There's so many good ones. There's one I wanted to read, but it's quite a bit longer, so I'll think I'll do it on the next one. And there's also just something I want to say about it too, as well. So, rescue on the tracks. 'Tis only when they spring to heaven that angels reveal themselves to you. Robert Browning. Paracelsus, Part 5. Carol Toussaint was driving her large station wagon across Arlington Heights, Illinois, about 5 p.m. One hot summer weekday. She was going to pick up one son from his guitar lesson and her other youngsters, Dave and Katie, who were in the back seat. It was past the time when she should have started dinner, and her mind was on getting home as soon as possible. The traffic light was green. Carol turned left off the busy highway up a little incline and onto the railroad tracks that intersect the downtown area. But before she could complete her turn and travel through the railroad crossing, her engine suddenly died. She was stuck, blocking several lanes with her front wheels resting in the track grooves. Carol tried again and again to start the car, but the ignition wouldn't catch. The traffic light changed, cars began to honk, brakes screeched as rush hour travelers attempted to go around her and avoid plowing into one another. Dave and Katie, hot, confined, and sensing their mother's distress, started to complain. It was a driver's worst nightmare. Yes. Suddenly a young man, wearing a white shirt and tie, loped casually over to Carol's open window. Dave, then only about 5, thinks the man got out of a small brown car before approaching them. "Did you know that you're in danger here?" the man asked softly, with an air of complete peace and tranquility in the midst of the rapidly snarling traffic. "I sure am," Carol responded. "My husband's going to kill me for being late and not having dinner ready, if one of these drivers doesn't do it first." "No, I didn't mean that," the young man went on. "There's a train due through here in about half a minute. I'm going to have to move the car for you." Carol had forgotten that at this time of day commuter trains whizzed through the crossing at frequent intervals. Some stopped, others didn't. And yes, now she noticed that there were several people standing at the station a block or two away. But even if this coming train was due to stop, it couldn't avoid hitting her. At this point, it would still be traveling too fast. He walked to the front of her car and gave it a little one-handed push. The huge station wagon dislodged easily from the track grooves, and as the crossing gates came down and warning bells began to clang, it rolled back across the tracks and safely over the little incline where it again came to a stop. Almost immediately the train roared past. Stunned, Carol realized that, without the young man's help, her family would have been hit and killed. But where was he? The train had blocked her view for only a moment. How could he have disappeared in this open area without her seeing him? By this time, several passers-by and commuters were approaching Carol's car. "Need help, lady?" they asked. "Maybe we can push the car across the street to the gas station." How odd, Carol thought. No one was running or upset in any way. They all acted as if her car had stalled where it now was. No one seemed to realize that she and the children had just been rescued. Hadn't they witnessed her close call or the young man? But her children had. "Who was that guy who pushed us, Mum?" Dave asked from the back seat. "Where did he go?" If the man had arrived in a small brown car, it had somehow disappeared, even though traffic was snarled all around them. "I have no idea, Dave," Carol said, puzzled. It was certainly a mystery, and it would take several days of musing before she began to realize just what had happened. One commuter stood in the middle of the intersection and directed cars around the scene, while another went to alert the gas station. Mechanics and others pushed Carol's car down the rest of the incline to the station. Although the man in the white shirt had dislodged the large vehicle with one hand, it took 8 people to move it all the way across the highway. Carol's husband didn't get his dinner on time that night. He received a far greater gift. Okay, those are the stories for tonight, or for now. Actually, I was thinking of reading some more later, hopefully, if I can. I just want to say Happy New Year's Eve to everybody, and I pray that 2022, 2022, the year 2022 has some breakthroughs where a whole bunch of angels can come down here and move some tyrants out of the way, like that angel did with that car. Okay, take care everybody. Talk to you soon.